No, it's out. All right. And all right. One sec. I just realized one thing. I had sound coming back off the other monitor.
Oh, wow.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you today?
How you doing?
We're all live now. So, hey guys, welcome to another podcast of toys, collecting, and unboxing. I've got a couple unboxings today, and one from June and one from the recent. Well, I can't say recent, but I mean Masters of the Universe, Mo2 as people like to call it, just to make it short. But thank you for joining us here down in New Zealand. I'm your guest, Aru. Guest, and guest, host, whatever, person at the other end of the screen. Thank you for joining us, and I'd like to welcome Big Stu back to our podcast because he's been amazing. He's sitting there in Borgia, Texas, manning his new store out there, 1.1 gigawatts, toys and nostalgia.
Call it gigawatts.
Of course, Ben gigawatts, and of course Ben Bristol. I forgot where he's from, but he will tell us, of course, who is a huge Transformers collector and fan. Of course, you can't be a fan. Well, you can't be a collector without being a fan. So I've got a couple of Bumblebees I want to show off, a little one and a big one, and we'll go on from there. So since you guys don't know Big Stu, you know Big Stu a little bit. I'll get him to speak later on to introduce himself. But first, let's get to know Ben. Ben, tell us give us a quick rundown about yourself.
I'm from Van Buren, Missouri, down in the foothills of the Ozark, and I grew up here and lived here most of my life. I did travel some, quite a bit. Right now, I work for Briggs & Stratton as a die-cast technician, which I don't know if a lot of people know. Briggs & Stratton make lawnmower engines, and which I don't actually build engines. I just make the parts for the engines. And I've been collecting Transformers for well over 15 years now. I had a small collection before, and my house burnt, and so we kind of had to start over again. And well, I kind of quadrupled what I had before now. So I've always been fascinated by Transformers, even when I was a young kid when they first come out in the 80s. Just always fascinated about having a car that turned into a robot. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like that's how we all got introduced, wasn't it? The Transformers the movie. So I mean, like that's how I got introduced. You got a free toy with it, and I think my dad they just bought it for us for Christmas or something or birthday, but it was exciting. I think
Well,
it must have been like '84, or I'm not exactly
80,
sure when
83,
because
I believe. I
yeah,
can remember coming home from school one day. Me and my brother, I've got a brother that's a year older than me. And we come home from school one day and sat down. And then all of a sudden, we always watch cartoons after school, we're sitting there. And all of a sudden, this show comes on. And it's these vehicles that turn into robots. And I was just mind blowing at the time. You didn't see quite, I'm sure GoBots come out like, I think they debuted 6 months before Transformers. But the stations that we got on our TV, we didn't get any of that. So, I mean, it was a surprise to come in and see this cartoon show, and it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
it was always fascinating.
Well, I mean, it was nothing like it before, was there? Like, seriously,
No.
You had a car that changed. The only thing I could think of, and I might be wrong here, now, did Automan come out before or after Transformers, do you think? Because I think that's the only time I could think of Automan. That's the blue cop who could whose computer was who changes his let me just find the because I've just thought about it this recently this past month, and I decided to watch it because it was such a cool thing that I had when I was a kid, and I thought, well, why don't I just watch it again, right, and see what it's about if I have the same love for it that I used to have when I was a kid. So Automan came out in '83, so around the same time. So let me see if I can share this here. I'll be able to show you this. There you go. So this is Automan, right? Do you guys remember watching Automan?
I remember briefly. It was something that probably it didn't last very long.
Yeah, it was like one of the shortest lived things around. It was like 12 months or something, and 12 episodes. But this is the only time that I can think of where a tour like a bike changed into a car into a helicopter, right? So I found it was quite interesting in that sense. So if you've got this computer whiz, it was way before its time. Seriously, way before its time. I don't think there's anything, if it was made today, it'd be like, it wouldn't be, it'd be like just anything else. But this is like '83, much like Transformers, way before its time, I guess. But like it's allowed, what's that, 40 odd years to be here and, to be able to build a fandom, movies, TV shows, just a whole, comic books and everything. So this is about Autobot here, a computer-generated superhero and his human creator fight crime in the city. So this is from Glenn Larson. I mean, you guys probably know more about, Glenn than I do. So, but yeah, so I thought that was quite interesting in the sense that, around the same time, these amazing, things came out, like Knight Rider came out of it as well. Around that time, you had the A-Team, such great shows just for kids, It wasn't, you didn't have to be a kid to watch it, enjoy it.
Yeah, you had that at that time. You had the Automan. I remember Automan. It lasted for one season. You had Knight Rider came out. I think this '82. The A-Team. You know, then a little bit later, Airwolf, MacGyver. I mean, it was a great time to be a kid, man, and watching these adventure action shows.
It was all rounded, which is what I liked about it, because like there was like you didn't have to like not, you know, you weren't like, I like this show and I'm not going to like anything else. It was like, what else is there? Give me what else, you know?
Give me more.
And so you're like, oh, you know, like I remember having to go to boarding school when my parents said to me, well, they won't let you watch TV after 7:30. And I got there and I was like, no, because before I got there, I was like, no, please, no, not Rider. I gotta watch Knight Rider. And yet when I got there, it was like, oh, you guys don't have to worry about it. You can go to 9:30. You know, so you had all that stuff that I enjoyed at home. I got to enjoy at Catholic boarding school, you know, and really enjoyed it with my friends. You know, we're basically, you're captive, you know, like prisoners in a place, and like you don't go home because you're all there. So you got to talk all the time about what you love, you know, what you saw on TV, and there was no sort of like, okay, I got to go home now, you know. But I think this whole magic about, you know, auto Transformers, just the idea that things could change, right? They didn't have to stick to just being a car. Now you went from car to you know, being a jet, to being a robot, to being an animal, right? And I think the animals came later. You guys probably know more about them than I do.
Yeah, the Beast Wars, I believe it started it was around 92.
Okay.
No, it may have been later than that. 94, I believe.
Right. So, Big Stu, tell us a bit about yourself, for those who are watching for the first time, so we can get you on, you know, so they can, you know, get to learn a bit about you.
All right. My name is Big Stu. I'm here in Borger, Texas. I own 1.21 gigawatts, comics, toys, and nostalgia. I'm originally from Orlando, Florida, and I'm a huge G.I. Joe collector, and I'm a huge action figure collector in general. And I just love everything nostalgic, really. I'm a huge movie buff. Seen a ton of movies. I actually even have a running discount in my store. If you can beat me in 80s movie trivia, you get 10% off of whatever you purchase. So haven't really had to use that discount, you know, very much. So
Now I'm just gonna pop up your store on Facebook here, so people can see.
okay.
Get to the link. Now I forgot to, you know, we were going to sort this out about name-wise, but we haven't done it yet. But this is the link for the Facebook page for the store, and the store is called, we have it here, so you guys, I don't have to repeat it because I always get it wrong.
1.21
and the way we pronounce it. Yeah. So here we go. So 1.1 gigawatts, comics, toys, and nostalgia. And I'm sure when if Ben's down that way, he will drop in and say hello. Now that you guys are introduced to each other.
It's nice to meet you, Ben. I'm Stu. You know, so
it's not nice to meet you too.
Yeah,
I'm sure
man.
next time I go to see Hawk, I'll have to stop by for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Meeting across the states, as they say, whereas we're meeting across the world, or countries. Well, across the world.
Oh yeah, across the world.
Oh, yeah.
You're on the other side of the world, aren't you?
Yeah, down at the bottom. You guys up there in the northern hemisphere, and we're in the southern hemisphere. A year and an hour and a day in the front, something like that. So
behind, we're an hour and a day behind you, and then we're in the summer, and you're in the winter.
Yeah, like you can see, hoodie, skivvy, hat the heater on. I got my Batman, you know, woolly socks on. Keep me warm. Now let's talk about, like, you know, I think there's this whole, I mean, like, I don't think you can go anywhere in the world and not know what a transformer is, right? So this guy here, I swapped these with video games for this one in about 2014 with with Solid Dad, his son, when I was living there, had a whole bunch of stuff, and I ended up with that. I wasn't into I wasn't into it, you know, because I wasn't into collecting toys hard out that time. But the kid wanted the joystick, and I wasn't using it. Like it's one of those, you know, those ones where you have you know, real lots of buttons for PC, and he was a big gamer at that time, and he was like, you know, it's only about 12 or something, and I said, look, just give me $20, because it cost me 120 for the joystick, and I said, you know, whatever you want to put. I guess, oh, I'll put this, I'll put this. I said, look, whatever. And then, yeah, so I ended up with a toy, and it's probably the best, you know, deal that I can be happy with because now I'm into collecting toys. But for me, you know, I could either take it or leave it when it comes to Transformers. But being a kid who, you know, like in '84, it was for you guys it was '83, right? But for us, it was about a year later by the time it got to us. So by the time it got to us, it was already a big thing overseas, and especially I guess in America and in Japan. But we didn't get to see it until the Transformers the movie came out, and they gave the VHS away with a toy. So you actually end up, you know, so we got a pack. So you had the VHS, and you had like I think it was Optimus Prime or something that came with it. And my dad went, and I'm like, okay, but I love the movie more than I love the toy. It was like just the fact that, you know, it was just like changing things and stuff like that. So what was your guys' experience with, you know, seeing it first? You know, Ben mentioned a bit about it, but let's go a bit more into it.
So the first time that I ever actually watched Transformers the movie was probably about 5 years ago.
Right.
The very first time I actually watched the cartoon animated movie. It's probably about 5 years ago. I'm a huge G.I. Joe fan. You know, Ben and I are on different sides of the coin, you know, so to speak. So when I watched it with first time I watched it with adult eyes, which I shouldn't have. I should have watched it with kid eyes, you know, and you know, so my first impression was not great. But now since then I've watched it a few more times, and I can see where it is you know, kids would love it, you know, especially where it would be an impactful movie, you know, back in 1985, 86 when it came out.
Well, the whole thing about the movie was, is we had like 2 or 3 years there where we actually got to live with the characters, you know, see the characters every day after school on the weekends, you know, and so when the movie came out, it's like, oh my God, they made a movie, you know. And of course, my mom and dad did not let me go to the theater to see it. I begged and begged. Me and my brother both begged, and it just didn't happen. So we got to see it about 6 months later on TV. I think on HBO it was released, and I about died when Optimus Prime died.
Yeah. Now, thinking about Optimus Prime dying, would it be like the same as Aslan dying for you in Narnia?
Say it one more time.
Would Optimus Ben, if the Optimus Prime dying in that movie be the same as Aslan dying for us kids who were into Narnia, The Witch and the you know, in that series, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Do you think it was the same sort of thing? That sacrifice?
Oh, probably. It just, I don't know. The thing with me in my mind is, oh my God, what are they going to do? Their leader is gone. You know this.
Yeah.
You know the whole concept, especially with G.I. Joe and Transformers, was you had good versus evil, and good always prevailed. Well, good just died. The backbone of the Autobots, you know, he's gone. So yeah, it was quite devastating. I mean, any figure that you would consider, you know, I don't know if you consider your idol or whatever, but the hero, the major hero, whatever dies, it's always devastating.
And it wasn't just Optimus Prime that died in that opening sequence.
Oh,
there was several Autobots that bit the dust, and you know,
most of the Series 1 Transformer figures they cleared the slate so they could re-release or release new figures.
Right.
Now,
so
did the TV series come first, then the movie, or was it the other way around?
They made two seasons. I think it was 70 or 90 episodes, And then they come out with the movie, and then they had a season 3, and then they had a season 4, but it only lasted 4 episodes.
Okay.
And at the end of season 3, of course, they brought Optimus Prime back. So, because there was just such a falling out on it all together. There's a lot of people that just so upset. So they brought him back, to try to appease people.
It was such a falling out. It affected the story arc in G.I. Joe the movie.
Yeah, originally they had because talking with Hawk, he always likes to fill me in on this stuff. Big G.I. Joe collector too. They had originally scheduled to kill Duke off in the original cartoon or the original movie for G.I. Joe. So basically, Hasbro, when it comes to the Transformers division, they said, "Here, hold my beer. We're going to do Optimus Prime." And for some scheduling region or whatever, Transformers was released before G.I. Joe. So as soon as they saw the backlash on Optimus Prime dying, they just put the skids on Duke and just mortally wounded him until the end of the movie.
But I contend because G.I. Joe had done the one thing that G.I. Joe had done differently than Transformers, from what I could tell, is that they created a leader structure almost every year. Every year you followed a different leader. So when we got to the movie, a lot of my friends would have been okay with Duke dying off, because we knew that we had another leader that was back, that was going to be, that we were going to follow, that we liked just as much. It would have been, it'd have been shocking still, but not quite as shocking as like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Because Transformers had the one backbone that was always constantly there, where the stories revolved around him.
So you're talking about this one here, right?
That's
or is it the one after this?
That's the series. It looks like that's the series. But okay. I can't tell.
So it came up on 84, so I thought that might be it. But
yeah, that's the TV series that you got pulled up.
Yeah,
you should type in G.I. Joe movie.
Didn't they originally start G.I. Joe with like a couple movies before they actually went into the series? Like
they did like five-part arcs that they did, and then that's how they did that, and then
okay.
And I think the first one was in 80. I think the first 5-part series was in 83 or 84.
I was thinking it was 82. But
I'm not this one here. Would it be the G.I. Joe, a real American hero, or is it Cobra
the
Revenge?
Mass Device?
Mass Device. Okay.
Yeah, the G.I. Joe, the Mass Device was probably the first one. Then Revenge of Cobra. Right here, the right there, the first one right there is the that says 1987.
It was
just underneath the thing. That's the G.I. Joe the movie. That's the actual movie.
Okay.
That's the movie we're talking about. And they basically had the scene where Duke dies, but they dubbed over it that he was in a coma. He fell into a coma. Like they could diagnose that right there on the battlefield.
Yeah. So I mean, but that's quite interesting because like, I think this is course correcting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of time people, like we've seen in recently, Disney doesn't course correct. They just keep piling ahead, right? Even like with something like even with HBO, they don't, Warner's, they don't course correct. But like they've been like, you think like, okay, it's going the wrong way. Okay, the fans are, the kids are out there going, they don't want to see death again. And if we go and kill Duke now, we're going to have a major backlash. That's 2 toy lines where some major character is, passing away, and you're going to traumatize kids. And I think, this is something that seems that like is lost on so-called modern audience studios. That whole, we're creating for the modern audience, but here you've got something that they did to course correct without destroying themselves. It's like, okay, Optimus Prime died, a whole bunch of others died. Kids reacted really badly. Now, if we do this, this is going to harm our brand.
Right. Well, the thing with Transformers, I think where they made a mistake is they should have introduced Hot Rod before, got us used to the character, and then kind of had him in not a leadership role, but a main role. So whenever we watched the movie, it wouldn't have been so devastating. Kind of like he was talking, Big Stu was talking about, every year they had other people coming up the ranks of G.I. Joe in commanding positions. If they would have did that with Transformers, it would have probably have been a lot easier to swallow at the time.
Yeah. I wonder if like, what would have been the case if they did do it? Would it, would we still be in love with, G.I. Joe? If the kids would still be, or would it be like not so,
I contend that if G.I. Joe would have come out first when it was originally scheduled, if it was the movie that we had, and they killed off Duke, I think we would have we wouldn't be talking about them retconning Transformers. I think they'd be like, oh yeah, okay, let's go ahead and kill off Optimus Prime, and we'd be talking about the how it affected kids, when Optimus Prime died versus how kids were affected when Duke died. Because then the first series that they came out, Duke was the leader, and then Flint came out, and all of the stories were about Flint, were Flint led, and then the third season was a combination of Sergeant Slaughter, Beachhead, Hawk. I mean, those were all led those stories. So when the movie came out, we had 4 leaders that we were all good. We're like, we all followed, and everybody was like, yeah, we like these guys. So them introducing Falcon as a new potential leader to G.I. Joe, we were like, okay, yeah, that's par for the course. That's how it goes for the G.I. Joe franchise. Now, I don't know how many different characters were introduced every year for Transformers versus G.I. Joe, but almost every year in G.I. Joe, there was probably another 10 or 12 characters introduced every year. Different characters, G.I. Joe and Cobra. So, yeah, the whole idea of having a different leader show up for your G.I. Joes was old hat for us.
Could it be because G.I. Joe was going for more of a realism army, setup, having units, having commanders and all that. People do die and, going to war and stuff.
I do think that had something into effect as well, because a lot of the kids that were watching the G.I. Joe cartoon were reading the comic books, and in the comic books they were dealing with death every episode or every issue. Somebody was getting killed or whatnot. Maybe not be a named G.I. Joe. It was definitely not a named G.I. Joe, but a character that they introduced in the comic book that was important in the comic book sense. So, their tolerance level was a little, they were a little bit more prepared for it than the kids that were watching Transformers.
That's kind of oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you carry on, and we'll get back to my question.
I was going to say, it's kind of like he was talking about the comic book stuff, and I'd watch the comic books actually come out before the series did with Transformers, and it was a totally different concept on the comic books, because like he was talking about with G.I. Joe, somebody was dying. Well, the same way with the comic books on Transformers, there was a lot of them dying off here and there, getting killed and all that. So, I mean, if I probably would have at the time been reading the comic books while watching the cartoon series, it probably wouldn't have been as bad to see that in the movie. Yeah. But I didn't start getting the comic books till after the movie come out.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Because it was like about a lot of time they started. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, because a lot of time you don't know the comics are out there unless you're going to the comic store all the time. And a lot of kids didn't, I guess not every child knows that's where things are happening, that a comic store has got, has got an adaptation or it's based on a comic book or so on. Like even now, people don't know a lot of things that are coming out on the movies and TV is from comic books, right? And the damage there is that those shows aren't telling people, go and check this out at the comic store, right? Go check it out. This is the book it's based on and so on. Sometimes they just go, created by such and such, and that's about it. And I think that's the damage that's what's failed the comic store, as far as I can see, is that they've got this multi-billion-dollar franchises, right, that hasn't paid homage to where the original,
where it's come from.
IPs come from. Yeah.
Yeah.
Carry on, Ben.
I had a neighbor a few years ago who just trashed me about reading comic books. He was a good guy. He's just giving me a hard time, but not nothing serious. But anyway, he's like, yeah, I'm going to go see a movie tonight. I said, yeah, what movie are you going to go see? He says, I'm going to go see History of Violence. It's a really good movie. I said, yeah, it's a really good movie based on a comic book. He's like, no, it's not. I'm like, yeah, it is. It's definitely based off of a comic book. And I listed like 5 movies that he liked that were all based off of, graphic novels, comic books that he didn't realize. I'm like, so don't dog comic books. They've been in the movie industry for a lot longer than people really realize. They just
right.
Well, the comic books from today are a lot different than they were, say, back in the 60s and 70s. There might as well be books, or because there's always adult aspects to the comic books nowadays, and what they were. They're not campy and however you want to put it, from like when we were kids. They're more adult aimed now.
Yeah.
So I mean, it just makes sense that let's make movies out of them.
Oh yeah.
But comics have always had a maturity to them, depending on what series they're about. Like, I've been talking recently, this past week, to John Del Arroz, who's a writer, novelist, as well as a comic book creator. And he was just, I think we were talking about how X-Men in the late 80s with the Claremont run comic book series, right? But it wasn't dumbed down for children, and it wasn't like too far up, mature that kids couldn't read it. And so when they transferred that to the X-Men animated series, they didn't do the same thing. They kept that same middle ground of not being too mature and not being too childish. And it's become a phenomenon. Like, nobody can say the X-Men didn't affect society the way, this animated series, like G.I. Joe and like Transformers, that's right up there. But now, of course, they play around with it and ruin the franchise to when people don't even care about buying the comic book. So let's talk about what was it like growing up? Like, you guys seem to have a more, you remember a lot from that time period. I don't, because I've had quite a few head injuries, and so I forget what was like to be at that age and enjoying, watching these things at that time. So let's talk about that. I mean, like, what was it about this show that really, we've dropped in it here and there, but like that really got you guys really interested in, especially Ben, like, with Transformers?
Well, I mean, it was just, as being a young kid in the late 70s, early 80s, we had cartoons like Inspector Gadget, which is fine cartoons, Inspector Gadget, and you had Scooby-Doo, and it goes back to kind of talking about like the campy aspect and everything. But then you have these cartoons like G.I. Joe and Transformers that come out, and even Jim and all that. We have this realistic aspect. It's like you were talking earlier. It's something that you could actually see that could be real. And so the concept of everything just kind of grasps your attention. And it's like, oh my God, this is just so amazing. You would never seen anything like that before. And it was something new. And then they could be serious. They could be comical. It wasn't always just some, like I said, campy cartoon series. These were kind of realistic. You had realistic problems. And then, like I said, you always had good versus evil, and good always prevailed. It was just an amazing time. And, you even had like the Thundercats and stuff, and He-Man all just came out at the same time. There's something just magical about the whole experience as a kid. You just didn't have that before. You had all these new toys and the toys and the cartoons and stuff coming out. You could actually grab your favorite figure, as you can see, and it's like, oh, you can go over to your buddy's house and you could have a battle, and then you'd sit down and watch the cartoon series, and then it was just something captivating about it. it was nothing else like it until, you know, all this stuff just kind of, it just all at once just kind of hits you. All these different cartoon series. And I mean, you could just spend hours if you had the satellite back then, you could just spend hours watching all these different shows and stuff. And it was just, like I said, mesmerizing.
Yeah.
There's something magical about it.
And I remember, you know, coming home from school and I would grab my GI Joes. I'd bring them out to. We had in Orlando, Florida. We had this place, little room we called it a Florida room. It was like had a bunch of windows. You could see outside, a lot of sunlight coming in, and that was where my TV was. The TV that the kids were able to watch. And being that I was the only kid at home at that time, I'd get all my GI Joes over there and I'd set them. You know, I'd set them out in front of me on the floor or whatever, and watching GI Joe as I'd watch Transformers Jim, and then GI Joe, and when Jim and the holograms and Transformers were on, I was really intent on playing with my GI Joes, doing that adventure, just kind of halfway listening and watching to the show. And then when GI Joe came on, man, I was glued. I was glued, and a lot of times whatever character that they were centered around on that show, that was the figure that I had in my hand, you know, as I watched the show and, you know, playing with that figure, you know. So, I mean, that was a beautiful time, you know, and because it was just so, I wasn't getting into any trouble. I wasn't, you know, doing anything bad. Wasn't hurting anybody. I was just trapped with my imagination and watching this show. You know,
you was in the zone.
I was in the zone. I was in the zone. Didn't worry about the world.
So I remember, like, I mean, for me, like, I didn't have figures. Like, I got like gaming, like, you know, like Rubik's cubes and stuff like that, and you know, Tommytron, and I think I've got a Shark Attack Tommy video game thing you look into, but the figures, like my neighbor had, like, you know, the He-Man thing, so he was into the He-Man. His sister, right, the young girl, she had the Tila stuff, from what I remember, and so there was so many of them. Like the dad was, I think, if I remember right, he was the executive at the place my dad worked at, right? So his dad was a bit more affluent money wise, and you know, and so he was just getting whatever he wanted of whatever, you know, and his whole thing was He-Man. But I think He-Man at that point had come out, what, about like a year earlier than Transformers, and so it was like this. You're almost being geared towards owning the characters that you saw on TV by that point. Do you, like, with you guys knowing a bit more about that, do you know a bit more about the history, like between the years when the toys suddenly became a big thing in the US with cartoons and stuff like that?
So, from what I remember, 1981 is when He-Man and the Masters of the Universe came out, and then really close after that was G.I. Joe in 82, and then 83 or 84, I can't remember, on Transformers. But did the Transformers come out in 82 or did they come out in 83, Ben?
Well, the comic book come out, I believe, in 82, the end of 82. And from what I understand, Hasbro, if you look at a lot of the original toys, they are stamped 82. Okay. So they started bringing the toys in 82, and then they did the comic book for them in 82, I believe. And then it's like, from what I understand, they had some kind of trade agreement with the toys and stuff. So Hasbro had to scramble around and make a series, or they were going to be fined. So they had to come up with the cartoon. So that's whenever they put Transformers in development, and it was released, I believe, in 83.
Okay.
The series.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so for me, my first foray into the action figure world was He-Man. Well, was actually Star Wars. The Empire Strikes Back was huge for me, but I could not stand the articulation. Even at 5 years old, I couldn't stand the 5 points of articulation. I hated it.
That was always my thing with He-Man, because
Yeah.
his arms would go up and down and his legs would go
Right.
out, and that was it.
Yeah, and I went to He-Man for a little while because I was a huge fan of Conan the Barbarian. My mom actually took me to go see Conan the Barbarian. My mom taking me to a rated R movie that blood and guts all over the place, but
Well,
I was a big fan of.
They did that with Rambo. Rambo was a pretty gory movie, and all of a sudden, here's all these Rambo toys with guns and vehicles and stuff.
But
and the animated series as well.
Yeah.
And so when I got into G.I. Joe, there was a ninja character that I wanted, ninja action figure that some of the kids at the school had, and I wanted them, man. I'm like, oh man, I got to get that figure. That's the only figure I'll get for G.I. Joe. Asked my dad to go get them. He went around because at the time we were living in Alaska, and he went to every toy shop that he could find in Alaska while he was working that day to find this action figure for me. He found it. Brought me Storm Shadow. That was the first real action figure of G.I. Joe action figure I had. And I opened it up and I'm like, I don't care about G.I. Joe anymore. I don't care about G.I. Joe. I don't care about Star Wars. I don't care about Masters of the Universe anymore. I don't care about Star Wars. I don't care about my GoBots that I had. I had GoBots. I don't care about any of those things anymore. This is what I want. This is what I'm going for. And one of the big reasons I never got into Transformers is because they were not the same scale as G.I. Joe. So it didn't make sense for me to have a transforming car that wasn't much bigger than my G.I. Joe action figure was, proportionate wise, and especially when I had vehicles that were running around that were bigger than the Transformers. So it was this that was that's my play pattern my little mind couldn't accept that difference in size, So, but that was but I loved, and that's how I got into the G.I. Joe, playing with G.I. Joes, and watching the TV series. What got you into it, Ben?
We were talking about like GoBots came first. Can we talk about GoBots? Because I kind of know a bit, but not much at all, because that was the predecessor to Transformers, wasn't it?
Ben, can you hear us?
Yeah, I think he's got a muted when he answered the phone.
So from what I understand is Transformers and GoBots.
I kind of got lost there. What's going on?
Okay. I think it had to do with your phone when you answered before, like your text message before. Yeah. So we just carry on.
Talking about GoBots and Transformers. And from what I remember,
I still haven't got Stu back on.
Oh, you don't have me on yet? But there was a race to get them out into the market, and GoBots just beat Transformers just by a few months. So I I had GoBots first, and I thought that GoBots was going to be the transforming toy of the century, but then Transformers came out and totally crushed GoBots.
Right. So is it this one here? Like, is this like what we're talking about here, movie wise, or did the movie come out first, or was it a TV show that came out first? This is 1984. We're looking at here with the GoBots.
Yeah, it was just the TV series. So the TV series usually came out a year or two after the toys came out.
Right. So GoBots are loosely based on a Tonka toy line. Yeah. So with, of course, with Transformers, it's the Hasbro toy line, isn't it? Or am I wrong there?
Right.
Right. So Tonka really kind of think they went, maybe if they'd won out on this one, they might have, been quite a big name in this side of things rather than into like the construction toys. Tonka over here is known as like construction trucks, like the big huge yellow trucks. That's I wouldn't have thought they would be part of the GoBots at all.
Right. Well, there was talks about that they were a lot easier to transform. The GoBots were, and there's talk about like if they would have been a little bit more serious about that line, it could have been a big competitor for Transformers at the time.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with marketing too.
Yeah.
So was Transformers the movie shown on the big screen?
Yes, it was.
Right. And what did GoBots ever show that on the big screen?
I don't think it was. I don't think they did a movie for GoBots. I think they just did the TV series.
Well, from what I understand, when Transformers come out, it GoBots come out first, and it was doing really well, and then Transformers come out, and I mean, it just sapped GoBots, and it carried on for a little while, but they just didn't have the budget that Transformers got with the toys and everything. So
right.
I don't think they were able. I think they just eventually just dropped it because they just couldn't go anywhere with it after Transformers come out.
That's about the toy line. Yeah.
I wonder if they had the budget to make a movie that they could have had, like, at least on par with competing with Transformers, because I think there is that element where you kind of, if it's a TV show on TV all the time, you kind of think, oh yeah, it's on all the time, and you get, just a kids thing. But if you have to take your child to a movie, it kind of has this elevation of that property, because no longer is it just Saturday morning cartoon type thing, but it's actually where you can actually take your children to watch it, sit there with them and watch it together. And then you realize, there's things you can explain and so forth. There's actually dialogue you can have. And that actually makes you as an adult, as a parent, invested in it as well, or as a guardian invested into the toys as well as the show. And then when you go by and you understand, hey, now I get why he's into it or why she's into it. And you kind of have that understanding between why why the child wants that for Christmas, or why it wants it for birthday and stuff. And I think maybe that was something that I think my dad must have realized by getting us a deep video, because I never asked for it, that I can think of. They say, this is what I want. He just basically thought, it's a movie and a toy. That's great. He could have the toy and she could have the movie to watch, And I remember my sister and I, we just were sitting there watching the movie all the time. I can't remember how many times I watched it, but I've watched it so many times. Even so that I'm actually, recently I made sure I bought me a DVD for my collection out of it, for my collection of the movie, and it's like, it's something, and it's a lot of, like, I kind of, I'm understanding one, Stu calls it nostalgia, because it's not just being a fan. It's there's a part of it that you are being a fan of something, but you're also nostalgic about the past. But it's also because you also get to now have the money to buy the things you never could buy, when you were a kid, and all your parents couldn't afford to, because not everybody has the money as a parent to give their children whatever they want or whatever's popular at that time. And I know I didn't get a lot of things that were popular at the time. We had somebody else outside of the family who would do it, who was quite, well off, and we'd get to receive our, our most popular toys that way. But give us a bit more rundown on, the characters to do with Transformers. Ben,
that's all you
get some toys.
Well, are you talking about just the demeanor, or just the characters themselves, or?
All of the above. Just what made them so, so important to you as a kid growing up and saying, yeah, this is for me, like Big Stu said, G.I. Joe's for me now, and everything else has to go on the sideline. But yeah, for yourself, what was about Transformers that really hooked you?
Well, you had this big semi truck, and of course he was the leader, and then you had all the other Transformers. You had just different variety of cars. Stuff, me growing up in Southeast Missouri, you didn't see these cars on the road. Probably the biggest sports car we saw around here was a 280Z Nissan or Datsun car. But you got to see all these exotic vehicles, and then it just, it let your imagination run wild. And then as far as like the Decepticons, you had Megatron, and I really hate how they demonize guns and stuff. But you had Megatron, who was a P-38 Walter P-38, which was it's just so neat, because at the time when I was a kid, we still play Cowboys and Indians. So you have
Yeah.
this gun, you know, and then we're all out. And of course, when Galvatron came out, he made noises. So that was fantastic because he was a cannon, then he was a gun, and then you had it was Astro Magnum, but Hasbro got the license for it and became Shockwave, and he was a futuristic pistol. So I mean, like I said, we all still played Cowboys and Indians and stuff. So I mean, it was so interactive. But it's just the characters, and then each character had their own persona. Like you had Jazz, which was a Porsche 911, and it's like, oh, you just didn't see those around here. And then he had Scatman Crothers who voiced him, and it was just so cool to hear him. You know, he just automatically you're drawn to him. He's like, oh, this is a favorite character. Then you had Bumblebee, which was a Volkswagen Bug, and he just had so much heart. He was just such.
Of course, they've changed over time, but like, the Bumblebee was something special, wasn't it? Like, I don't know, it always got me because
he was always a fan favorite.
Yeah.
So
carry on.
And then you had Cliff Jumper, which was I don't know if he was supposed to be a little Toyota car of some kind, but him and Bumblebee looked alike in the original series. There's little differences, but he was more of a gritty Bumblebee. He was ready to jump in and fight anybody 3 times his size, and it's so interesting. But each character had such a broad personality, and it was always so interesting. So it's kind of like whenever the movie came out and you had Hot Rod, and here you have this cocky young Transformer, and it's one of those things. Even though he got Optimus Prime killed, you couldn't help but I was like, oh, he just so much enthusiasm. And then I think it kind of hurt whenever he became leader, and he's like, when you're watching the 3rd season, and he's always woes me, and I don't know if I can do this. He's always worrying. But you had the character when he was Hot Rod that he was like, let's go, let's get it done. He's just, oh, go for it. And then as a leader, he was something less to be desired.
Yeah.
So, but all the characters, they just all had, there was no monotone to them. They were all just distinctive. So that's what it made that so interesting, because it was never dull, because like I said, each one had their own personality, and they were just so broad in their aspects. So
and it shows that how important it is to have some sort of a media view, something on media to push the toy. If you didn't have the Transformers with all the different characters in Transformers or G.I. Joe, it would have been a fleeting toy that would have lasted maybe a year or 2 years. I mean, at the time, a toy franchise was expected to last like 2 years. Right. Barbie and Hot Wheels was one of the only ones that were really had staying power. But they were expecting maybe 2 years to last.
But I think that's one of the mistakes that Hasbro had made, is like, oh, we need to make room for new characters, so let's kill off these other characters. Yeah. Me as a kid, whenever they started killing characters, of course you couldn't buy them anymore. When they took them off the shelf, they put the new ones on, and you're like, well, I still want a Megatron, I still want an Optimus Prime, I still want a Jazz or Wheeljack. And then, I couldn't get them then, and it was so upsetting, And then you got the new figures, and the new figures weren't as articulate in movement as the original G1s were. Of course, the original G1 were all based off Diaclone figures from Japan,
right?
But it's like I remember getting my hands on a Rodimus Prime. I'm like, basically, you just folded his body over, and he was a truck. And whereas you had Optimus Prime, and you folded his arms out, and you had a lot more movement with him. And so, I mean, and then like Blur and Cup, they were just very simple. You just popped them up and they were done.
Right.
And it's like, well, that wasn't as fun as the old ones or the original ones were. But you still had a lot more imagination with them.
Do you think they did that mostly for the parents? You know,
It could be. That was always my thing. When I get a new Transformer, I would open the box. I wouldn't even look at the directions. I wanted to see if I could transform it without looking at the directions. And me and my brother both was the same way. So we were sitting there because every Christmas, every birthday, we would get one, you know, and he'd have his and I'd have mine. Of course, they were different characters. And we were sitting there to see if we could transform. Then when we got done, we'd switch.
Nice.
And I would do his and he would do mine. And so that just hours of fun there.
Yeah.
I was just wondering about, like, you mentioned Diaclones. Is that the right spelling there, or, you know, what is that?
Diaclone.
Diaclone.
Okay, you have Tommy Tomei, which is the original owners of Transformers, basically. But in Japan, they'd come out in the late 70s, and the figures they had, you know, were basically Transformers. They had 2 or 3 different lines. They had the jets, they had the vehicles, and there was another one I can't remember right now. And Hasbro saw this going on. They were real popular in Japan. Hasbro saw this going on and said, "Hey, Tommy Tomei, let's do a partnership here. I want to bring your toys over to the U.S." So basically, they repainted them and made them Transformers and sold them in the U.S. And then Transformers was so popular that they went around buying up other figures that transformed, like I was talking about Astro Magnum Man or Galaxy Man from Radio Shack. They actually bought that and turned that into Shockwave. And then there was Omega Supreme, and it come from another company, and I can't exactly remember the name of it right now. And they bought it to introduce into the Transformers line. But the main key figures were from Tommy Tomei from Japan, and they just partnered with Hasbro and brought them to the U.S. So, and they were all originally known as Diaclones there. Now, if you can get your hands on a Diaclone figure, they're worth quite considerably more than a Transformer, even a Series 1 G1 Transformer. So, which I don't have any Diaclones, but I do have a lot of original G1 figures. Optimus Prime.
This is the Diaclone here. So this is from the wiki for that page. You know, it's quite a, you know, you can look. It looks basically kind of like Optimus, but not Optimus. It's got like a. Or does it look like a jet? Does it look like Jetstream?
Not for sure. He's a little bit different. But the actual figures, if you do look them up, like Ultra Magnus, he was red and blue instead of red, white, and blue like he is in the U.S. And even Optimus Prime was a little bit different colored. So that's where the die-cast part come from, because it was Diaclone, because they were part die-cast. And they kept the die-cast on him even when they shipped him to the U.S. as Transformers. That's why Optimus Prime, the front of his cab is die-cast. And Starscream's chest is die-cast. It's because they were all part of the Diaclone series.
So these guys, like, when they bought, was it like a brother? Was it like a 2 brothers or something like that? You mentioned these guys are the ones who brought them over to the US and then renamed them as Transformers.
Right.
Now, who were they part of some studio or company that they could afford to do this?
Well, you know, Hasbro was still a pretty young company, and they weren't a multi-billion-dollar company like they are now.
Right.
They were popular. They had a lot of popular toys. I think they were more known for board games originally than they were for the action figures. And they decided they wanted a piece of the pie, basically. And they saw these toys over in Japan. So they just basically called Tommy Tomei up and said, "Hey, you know, we would like to bring them to the U.S." So they partnered with them and went in with them like 50-50 or whatever. So basically Tommy Tomei backed them and let them send the figures over here to sell them as Transformers. And then they actually carried back over to Japan, because after the series ended here, they had several cartoon series off of the G1 Transformer cartoons that carried on way in the later years. So basically, I think because Tommy Tomei was a well-known company there in Japan, and they had such success with it, they were all for it. So they were definitely willing to. See on the picture there, if you look, you got Jazz and which would be the red one. I think would be Sunstreaker, but they're all different paints. Or those original Transformers, I think. But like the Ultra Magnus over there in the corner, that's an original Diaclone, and he's a different paint. So,
right.
But they were so popular
I mean,
there, they just like, well, let's we're going to go ahead and go with Hasbro and back them on this deal, and so they sent it all over here, and both of them made bunches of money off of it.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah. So I was messing around. This came in actually this week. I don't know who this guy is.
that is I'm trying to think. I've got him up here. It's Silverbolt. I can't think of his name right now. My mind's blank. There's so many different names trying to keep up with. He's part of the aerial bots. He's the leader of the aerial bots.
Okay.
He's a combiner.
Oh, is he a combiner?
Yeah, I've got I've got
Oh
that
yeah, I can see
figure, but I actually have. If you look up here in the corner, I actually have a third party, and that's what he looks like as a combiner.
So is this a G1 as well, or no?
That is a G1.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. He should have a piece of die cast on him somewhere.
Is that him there, the bottom right?
The bottom right?
Yeah, on the image there. In the
It
gray.
might be him.
Yeah, the bottom right. Yeah, that's. I'm trying to remember his name. I think it's Silver. Is it not Silverbolt?
I have no idea.
I wanted to say Silverbolt, but I just my mind's went blank.
Yeah, he's missing a leg. That's the only that's the piece that's missing. I don't know if he came with other stuff or not, but I can't even figure out how to get the leg out.
Do you want to hold it up so we can see it?
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me just get you onto solo.
Yeah, he's missing a leg.
Yeah.
That's
a battle damage.
Yeah, I think there's the back plate on him somewhere is die cast. There should be.
So his main body seems like it's die cast, painted die cast.
Right.
The main body portion of him. Everything else is plastic.
So by die cast we mean metal, right?
Metal, yes. It's a variation of aluminum, zinc, and different things. Kind of they could call it pop metal, but they back in the day it wasn't a real toy unless it was had metal on it. It was die cast. If you didn't have die cast, it was considered junk. That's the reason why they was so important when they brought them over here that they kept the die cast aspect on them.
Right.
So
because otherwise it's just plastic, and it's
right.
There is an aspect if it's plastic, it kind of feels like it's cheaper.
Yeah, the mindset, especially after like World War II and everything, is here in the U.S. is like, oh, it's plastic's junk. Because, they still made cars were all steel. The bumpers were steel, everything. So if you didn't have an aspect of metal on that toy, it was considered garbage.
Right.
So that was it was so important. That's why it was so important to have that aspect of die cast on those toys. It's like, hey, these are quality, and it was a selling point for a lot of toy manufacturers.